Welcome back to the channel of truth, trust, and transparency. Today, I'm breaking down what are the upfront and ongoing costs for a $550,000 purchase at a 6.2% interest rate with a 5.5% yield. Now, you're probably wondering, how did I get to such specific numbers? And the answer is simple. Lisa Pinder left a comment on one of my videos asking me if I could run the numbers on those particular circumstances. And the answer is yes, I can definitely do it. And I think there's some value in here and some things to learn for not only Lisa, but also you watching. So I'm going to break it down. Now, whilst I didn't get all the details available, deposit size and all that kind of stuff, I've made a couple of assumptions. And the reason why I've done that is that you can start to see either the benefit or the ramifications on deposit size and where you're going to get that deposit from. So this is the way that I've done it. $550,000 purchase. We know that. We know what the rental yield is. The rental yield on a 5.5% purchase, it works out to be about $580 a week, which is about $30,160. So that rent doesn't change. The interest rates that I've used in terms of repayments for this exercise is 6.2%, and because it's an investment property, I've went interest only calculation. Now, let's have a look at a few things that I want to point out here. If you're jumping in with a 10% deposit, you're going to pay $55,000 for the deposit. Another thing, and I always say, and I try to note on these videos, is stamp duty is going to vary drastically state to state. If you're in New South Wales, that might be 19 grand. If you're in Northern Territory, that might go up to 25 or 27. Queensland might be a bit lower. So I've taken a bit of a mid-range approach in terms of the stamp duty. So the stamp duty will fluctuate on each state because each state has their own rules and what they want you to do and how much they want you to pay. So stamp duty will vary on the state to state. Now, I don't know what state we're purchasing this in, so I've come to a happy medium. LMI is going to be about $10,000. That will also vary a little bit bank to bank, but again, using an average there. $2,000 in legals, you have a $500 for a building and pest, and then $2.5 grand for others. Now, the $2,500 that I typically use, that is for, your bank establishment fees, your PEXA fees, anything little that might pop up that your solicitor or conveyancer will tell you that you need to pay in order to purchase that property. Now, if I didn't put that in there and I just kept it high level, and anyone watched this video and said, Dave, you stitched me up, I didn't have enough money, that is probably a little bit high for those that have purchased property and will say, look, you probably don't need the $2.5 grand. I know that, but I'm going to put that in there. So when you have 92 grand in cash, you're not going to be at a shortfall in $2.5 grand or need some other cash. So I'd rather you have that money there and saved and not need it than need it and not have it. Total money that you need upfront in your account to make that purchase, if you're putting down a 10% deposit on a $550,000 house, you're looking at about $92,000. 12% deposit. Now I'm going to put up here a link for you to click the video that I did. And what happens if you pay a 12% deposit? You'll note it here. My LMI goes down dramatically. Legals, BNP, everything else, very similar. Now I've paid a little bit more of the deposit, which is great. I've obviously paid less LMI, but my overall costs are 99 grand, so a little bit more expensive. 20% deposit. Now that's going to be a little bit better, obviously larger deposit, but because we've put that 20% deposit in, the bank doesn't make us take out $0 in LMI, legals, BNP and all that kind of stuff. $137,000 in cash up front. And then obviously if you're going to do an equity play, you won't need that cash up front, but likely you're going to do maybe one of these two options. If you're using equity, it would depend on your equity position. But for cash flow and everything else, I have included and rounded off a 10% deposit, and you'll see why when we get to ongoing costs and cash flow. Now, ongoing costs, yearly cost for that property, the first thing that I want to point out is going to be land tax. Now, when I did a video last in terms of how much does the property cost you, I think I had a comment that someone said, oh, you didn't put land tax in. Now, of course, land tax is going to vary state to state. Some states will have different thresholds in which that you can buy in and not pay land tax. Some you'll be paying straight away, and some it'll be a very small fee. I don't know the structure, I don't know the state of this this make-believe property. So yes, definitely consider it. Land tax, definitely consider it. I can't tell you what it's going to be because it will vary dramatically, state to state, structure to structure. However, what are some of the other costs that we know and then can put on here? Now we know what our loan amounts are going to be. I've put them over here in blue because they're the ones that change. $495, how do we get there? We plus $495 with the deposit, we get $550. $484 plus a deposit, we get $550. $440 deposit, $550 again. Repayments, 6.2% interest rate, interest only. That's how they're calculated. We have a management letting fee, which is 1 week's rent. Management fee of 6%. Again, management fee will vary state to state, depending on the location of this sort of property. I think 6% is pretty typical, pretty average. Insurance of $2,000. Council rates $22.50, water and sewage $12.50, advertising, lease preparation, admin costs, all those things your property manager goes through. They're typically about $500, and then we put a maintenance in there of $1,500. Now, again, as I've said before with maintenance, it might not be $1,500 a year, but if you have that in your head that it might cost you about that, you might not have anything for a year, or you might have a couple of $100 worth of things over the space of a year, but it just leaves buffer in there for when your hot water system goes, when your AC goes, if you've got any damages on the property that are big and requiring a lot of work, we have that contingency built up there. Now, for a 10% deposit first scenario, our total income is the rent, $30,160. Our total expenses is the interest repayment plus all these, which equals $40,580. Meaning we are going to be out of pocket $10,420 at the end of the year, which is about a negative $200 per week. Now, as you've probably seen and heard, if you haven't, go and have a look at my negative gearing video. But we know what happens with that. We can probably get a 20-30% rebate on that amount, and it can come down to $7,000. So it's not too bad. However, I'm not going to calculate that because I don't know your personal income tax bracket. But before negative gearing, we know it's about $200 a week. Now, we move over to the 12% deposit. Now, obviously, because we're paying a slightly larger deposit, we have a slightly smaller principal amount, i.e. we have a slightly smaller loan, which means we pay slightly less interest. Because we do that, when we get to the end of the year, all the income is going to be the same. It's the same $580 a week we're getting. However, the expenses are also a little bit lower because we pay less interest, meaning we're out $9,738 a year, which boils down to about $187 per week. So slightly better again. We go over to the 20% deposit scenario. Now again, 20% deposit, even smaller loan size, even less debt. How does that look on the bottom line? It means our expenses are only $37,000. How do we get to the expenses? Again, it's the repayments plus all these costs here that we know are fixed, meaning it's $37,170, $7,010 negatively geared that property is per year. Remember, if you're getting that 30% tax back on it, it goes down to 5 or just below, or $134 per week. Now, here's where it starts to get a little bit interesting. I know the common way people like to build property portfolios is to withdraw equity, go again, go again. The way I always say it, and it's probably not the most popular, and it's probably not something you would hear all the time. The quickest way to build a property portfolio, yes, is extract equity to go again, again, again. The safest way to build a property portfolio is to put cash deposits down that you have saved up yourself. Why? Well, let me show you. Now, let's just say we go into this deal with, we're going to use equity. Again, as I've said, and I've got a video on my channel, you can search through it, what really happens or why no one talking about this in terms of equity. What this actually is, remember, when I use equity, the equity extraction is still a loan. That is a loan for, obviously not the deposit because I'm borrowing the full amount. So I'm borrowing the $550 plus the stamps, the legal, the LMI, the legals, the bidding and pest, and anything else. The total purchase price is a loan plus all these other things. Now that might be split up, and I might have a loan size of $495 and then another loan size of $92 or whatever, but total, I'm borrowing more than that purchase price. I'm borrowing the purchase price plus all the other add-ons. That means, ladies and gentlemen, I have a loan size of $587. How did I get there? $550 plus stamps, LMI, legals, and all that kind of stuff. So it's a little bit more. The interest that I'm going to be paying on that is $36,394. It's the same rent. It means at the end of the financial year, my total expenses are $46. My income's still $30. It means I'm in a deficit of $16,000, $16,124 per year. It means I'm out of pocket $310 per week. Now we can see the difference here. This is why I always say it depends on your personal circumstances. If you're in a well-paying job, or you're in a good job that you get big chunks of commission for, or you can be disciplined enough to save the deposits. Why I think sometimes it's a little bit better is for that week-to-week cash flow, because you can think $310 per week, you only need 2 of those, and that's $1,200 a fortnight. Now, if you're on an average salary, $1,200 per fortnight is a lot of money post-tax. You got to pay $1,200 after you've got your salary in post-tax, then you've got to pay $1,200. That's a lot of money for people. So just keep that in mind, is that equity is the quickest way to build and scale it, but the ramifications are that you're going to be borrowing 100% of that loan. So even if you can throw off or put some money down to pay off all this stuff, because at the end of the day, these fees, these one-off fees, you rolling them into a mortgage that you're going to pay for 30 years. It's the same when buyer's agents say that they want you to pay their fee with equity. Remember, you're paying interest on that amount for 30 years. So these fees almost end up doubling. Now, I'd rather, even if I can pay these fees off in cash, I can set aside some cash. Fair enough if I've got this 100% loan on that. But if I can decrease my loan amount, I can decrease this headache here or this noise. And this is increasing, this is growing. These are sunk costs that I'm paying for 30 years. Just some food for thought, and obviously to Lisa too. Another layer that I wanted to add on to this particular breakdown was all these options in red don't look great. They don't look great. It's gonna, even if you look in here, you go $134 a week, it doesn't look great. Now, the reason why, my friends, it doesn't look great, regardless of deposit, 10, 12, 20, is because of the interest rate. 6.2% interest rate is historically high in today's age. I know you've got a mum or dad at home, or a great auntie, Uncle Bob from the barbecue is going to tell you that back in his day it was 15%. Yeah, but your mortgage was 50K, relax. So here it doesn't look great. So what I did in blue, I went back and ran the calculation if interest rates were at 4.5%. That is a very average or standard interest rate in my opinion. So I went back and ran the numbers. Now, even on a 10% deposit, here's the thing. 10% deposit, interest rates at 4.5%, that property is only costing you $2,000 for the whole year to own, $38 per week. Now that's palatable. 12% deposit, if you had a 4.5% interest rate, it only cost you $1,500, 20% deposit, you're actually positive cash flow of $470 a year, or a good $9 a week. There's the weekly coffees that your property's now paying for. But even in the equity circumstance, if the cost of debt is only 4.5%, because I've borrowed more than the purchase price, it's still going to cost me $6,145 a year, or $118 a week. So that's my entire breakdown. That's the way I see it. Everything looks pretty average on paper at the moment, but that's because we've got a 6.2% interest rate in this circumstance. So just remember, I mean, even if you're putting this is the importance of buffers and safety nets. If you're putting a 15 grand buffer in the offset of each property that you purchase, even if interest rates for the entire year were up at 6.25%, I'd have 18 months worth of backup cash. If I had 15 grand, this is costing me 10 grand a year. I've got 18 months. In 18 months, those interest rates probably go up and then probably come back down. So that's why it's important to have buffers to be able to help you out when it starts getting that negative. But also, and to take into consideration whenever you do these kinds of things, is that interest rates are at 6.25%, it hurts. These examples down the bottom in blue is that if they're at 4.5%. So look, Lisa, I hope that covers your question. If it hasn't and you need something else, or if anyone else has watched this and said, Dave, I've got a question, leave it in the comments. I'll do a video. But other than that, guys, I really appreciate it, and I will see you tomorrow.